It's got a coffee thing.
Oh, yeah.
It's gonna be a long. You like switch the chair on me?
No, I didn't. I'm not guilty enough.
You're not guilty. Somebody did it. It's Rich.
Rich.
Rich. Yes.
Alex, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me?
I can. Are you prepared to share your screen?
Yes, that's actually perfect.
Perfect.
Ready? Say, good evening and welcome to the City Council study session. Again, just a reminder in the audience, we typically do not take public input. We will be having a conversation regarding well-being and Ellensburg study results combined with the Planning Commission.
I would like to introduce the topic. Good evening, Mayor and Council. Heidi Barron-Cernaway, City Manager. You have before you a report that was provided by an outside group who approached the city to do essentially a study about well-being in Ellensburg. This wasn't unique to Ellensburg. They actually included Kittitas County and did communities in Yakima County as well. This is not a city-funded project. This is outside funding through the National Science Foundation. And this is a research group that, again, put together an independent report. As we approached the periodic update to our comprehensive plan, we thought it might be interesting from an outside perspective to have folks share some of their learnings about the city and the people in the city and what they have to say. So this again is, you can take this with a grain of salt or you can take this to just be a window into what folks heard in those interviews. And so we have a number of researchers today that were working on this project. I'll let them introduce themselves, and I know they'll be available for questions when they're finished. So I will turn it over to our research group.
Thank you very much for that introduction, Heidi. Let me try and share my screen and see if folks can see it. Does that screen share work for everybody?
It does.
Perfect. So I'm joined this evening by Dr. Courtney Flint, who is the lead researcher on this project, and also Dr. Claudia Mendez-Wright, who is a professor at Central Washington, actually in the sociology department there. So I will turn it over to both of them to let them introduce themselves, and then Courtney will give you a little bit of background about the project.
Go ahead, Claudia, just to introduce yourself.
Hi, everybody. My name is Claudia Wright. I am an assistant professor here at Central in sociology, and I am part of this research project that started with USU doing this wonderful assessment of well-being here.
Great. Hi, everybody. I'm Courtney Flint, professor at Utah State University, and really happy to be with you tonight. And it's been just a great pleasure to spend some time getting to know Ellensburg over the last year or so. So we'll just kind of give you an overview of what we set out to do, what we found, and then turn it back to you with a few questions and hope to get some dialogue going and some feedback as this evening moves forward. So go ahead to the next slide. So this project, as was mentioned, is funded by the National Science Foundation, and we're part of a a broader group called the Intermountain West Transformation Network. And our smaller group is focused on a project that's focused on characterizing well-being in the Upper Yakima River Basin. We're interested in how communities experience well-being and how different groups think about the well-being in their landscapes. In the Lake Yakima River Basin, we ended up partnering and focusing on 5 communities in Yakima and Kittitas County: Yakima, Tieton, Ellensburg, Cle Elum, and Roslyn. The whole project has kind of a backdrop to it. The Transformation Network is focused on around a theme called guided transformations towards greater resilience. And that's kind of a jargony mouthful, but I'm going to walk you through that after we get through our presentation of findings, just to share that with you in case it might be useful as you look forward and walk through your planning process. So we have, we lead the project out of Utah State here. Central, Claudia has been on board with us to help, particularly with bring the Latina perspective to our project, both in Ellensburg, but beyond as well. And then we've had some colleagues from the Washington State University. There was a doctoral student who did her PhD work out of this project as well on water and snow. And so we've just been happy to have this collaboration working with your community. Next. So we set out to do sort of community listening sessions, and we did start with some being there in person and hosting an event where people could come and share their thoughts with us. But we found pretty quickly in the project that one-on-one conversations were going to yield richer, deeper insights. So we kind of pivoted to an interview style where we did interviews with some people representing different spheres or areas of interest. And then any general community members that wanted to participate as well could do so. We did 29 interviews in Ellensburg, and we did 10 interviews that were with people that had more of a Kittitas County-wide vantage point. So there was quite a few insights for this type of study. So as I mentioned, we tried to make sure we were drawing on people with diverse perspectives and vantage points on the community. So we wanted to make sure we had people who represented business, government, and the broader civic community, or just the broader community interests. And as I mentioned, we had other community members that volunteered to participate as well. And so if you look at kind of how these were distributed, we wanted to share the coverage across the sort of spheres or areas of influence with you, so you could see what our vantage points looked like. And then our 17 community members were just general residents in the community that responded to flyers and other things we put up to recruit folks that wanted to share some time. And then those people all received a very modest little gift card for as a token of appreciation for their efforts as community members. Next.
I'm sorry, can you go back to that slide real quick?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Any questions on this slide?
Nope, just taking down information. Thank
Okay.
you.
Perfect. We can also go back to it and share our slides with you as well. So we kind of did all these interviews over 2023, and then we went into a sort of a in-depth, what we call coding process, where we really tried to extract all of the key findings and put them together. We shared a preliminary report with some of our key participants in the project in April of this year, got some feedback. We have since expanded that report and distributed that in June. And so this report sort of provides the highlights of what we learned. We will also have some in-depth work. Alex has his master's thesis, which kind of focused more in on food-related issues, and he finished that up successfully this spring, and he'll be sort of publishing some manuscripts from that. And as I mentioned, the doctoral student from Washington State worked on water issues, and she had a chapter on that, and that's under review at the journal as we speak. So the reports aren't the only mode, but they're the most accessible and translatable kind of piece that we felt we should share with you. We'll also send those articles when they come out too. So I'll turn it over to Alex now, who's going to talk you through the questions and the findings, and then he'll hand it off to Dr. Wright, who can add some more perspectives to this, and then I'll finish things off at the end. Thank you.
Thank you, Courtney. So as Courtney mentioned, we had kind of a few broad areas that we had specific questions on, or that we kind of went into these interviews looking to have specific conversation points on. So the first of those was just, what do people think contributes to their well-being? What do they think impacts quality of life for people in their community? And then on top of that, what concerns do people have, either in the immediate or looking towards the future? But building towards the future as well, we were also interested in what was exciting to people, what people are kind of looking forward to, initiatives or projects in the community that they really have their eye on or think might be possible to improve well-being moving forward. And then we were also interested in how different communities in this project, as well as just throughout Washington and throughout the broader region, are connected to each other, and how some of those connections may impact well-being for some of the different communities that we were talking to folks in. So in Ellensburg, there were quite a few things that people brought up as contributors to their well-being, or contributors to a good quality of life. The first of which was the kind of local natural environment. People also really feel very passionately about the small town feel of Ellensburg, and that it feels like a close-knit community. And kind of similar, people also feel that Ellensburg is a safe place. People felt that the university is a tremendous resource for the community, and it is really kind of a key point of culture and education and things like that. People also felt that there are a lot of community resources available, and that people are really invested in kind of providing things that they think others in their community might need. And then lastly, people feel that agriculture is a significant source of well-being, both like economically from like hay production, but also culturally from things like the rodeo, and just kind of a general sense of identity as being a farming community. So as I mentioned, with the local environment, people think that it's both the aesthetics of the environment that contribute to their well-being, as well as the access to like outdoor recreational opportunities or green spaces and parks and things like that. And they feel that Ellensburg is kind of a small, tight-knit community where they know their neighbors. They feel like neighbors are invested in helping each other. Or as this quote kind of discusses, if they see somebody in the grocery store that they either know or don't know, they can have a 20-minute conversation with them. And it just kind of feels like everybody is friendly with each other. And on top of that, people really value the safety that they feel in Ellensburg. People talked about Ellensburg as a good place to raise kids, or a good place to have a family. They feel that it's a place where you can just kind of have your kids out playing in the front yard or at a park or on the sidewalk, and not necessarily be worried. And people feel that CWU adds an important dimension to the community, like culturally, and bringing in a younger population of students. And then also just kind of as a key cornerstone of Ellensburg as somewhat of a college town. And people feel that there are community organizations that are kind of set up to help with things that might be a struggle for some in the community, like food access and housing were two issues that this came up with particularly often. This kind of shows both that there are people who are invested in helping those who are less fortunate in the community, but also kind of hints at some of the things that might be concerns for people as we move into a later section. And then lastly, agriculture, as I mentioned, both economically, but also culturally, obviously with things like the rodeo, the Kittitas County Fair, and then just hay production, kind of generally speaking, is an important source of culture and important to the local economy. And people had a few things that they brought up as concerning to them or things that they think may be kind of hindering well-being for some in the community. People were a little bit apprehensive about Ellensburg potentially losing some of the small town feel that they value over time. People talked about access to healthcare as potentially a concern in some areas. People talked about the growing population and some needs around affordable housing that they were concerned about. People talked about flooding. People also talked about food security. And some folks kind of struggling with food insecurity as a concern in the community. People talked about drought and the potential impacts of drought on agriculture. And then people also talked about some divisions within the community that are concerning to them. So as Ellensburg kind of grows and the population changes over time, people are concerned or apprehensive, as I said, that some of the small town feel that they really value may be lost if there are folks coming into the community who maybe aren't kind of embedded in the same like tight-knit neighborly connections that people talked about as a source of well-being. And kind of on top of that, people are also concerned that a changing or a growing population is not necessarily being met with the affordable housing options that are necessary to make sure that everybody who wants to live in Ellensburg can afford to do so, and that kids who grow up in the area can afford to stay at home and live in the community that they grew up in. People also talked about like specialty care or mental health care services as potentially concerns or things that people have to leave Ellensburg to find adequate access to. People talked about like food insecurity and kind of how many groups, this is kind of shown by how many groups are also providing food aid and things like that. But people talked about rising food costs and how some in the community may be struggling to have all of their food and nutritional needs be met. People talked about both flooding and drought as concerns. I think all of us in the West know that water is kind of something that can be a tricky subject. And sometimes it comes too much and too fast. And there are concerns around flooding, especially in the springtime when there's lots of snow melt happening really quickly up in the mountains. And then people also talked about how potential droughts in the future may impact agriculture and how if like hay growers, for example, are not able to get their third cut of hay because they do not have the water rights in a lower water year to be able to get that third cut, that might have serious economic impacts on the community and for that grower. And I will now turn it over to Claudia, who will talk a little bit more about a couple concerns that people mentioned, and then also tell you about what they are excited about looking towards the future.
So one of the community concerns that arose that were unique to the Latinx community was divisions between communities and within the Latinx community itself. So it's important that we understand it in three different areas. So division between communities, specifically, they were asking about a more mainstream community within Ellensburg and their community as Latinx, and also Latinx community divisions inside themselves. So I'm going to read the quotes because I think it gives it a little more, it illustrates it better, because they think, and this person was specifically talking about Latinx people, because they think they aren't welcome, that they would be discriminated because they don't speak English, and that if they don't know English, they cannot communicate, they can't get near, they think they cannot be heard. So in a way, they're trying to show how that division is happening, how they don't feel as members of the community, they don't feel included, and not necessarily blaming others, but just also saying, you know, they don't feel a part of this. Another quote is, "It worries me that within the same community, within the same group, in this case, the foreigners or Hispanics, they also discriminate between each other. You're not from this group, from such country, but you also speak Spanish, let's say. No? Well, you're not from this group because we have been here this long. We know it has cost us." So there's that division also between the community. Now, another interesting thing, and I want to be very very intentional on these results. We only interviewed 8 participants. So we have somebody said at the beginning, we have to take it with a grain of salt, and we need to understand that this is only 8 people talking about this, right? The word conservatism came about in 2 of the 8 interviews, but again, take it with a grain of salt. Conservatism, it translates to conservation or to preserve something that is traditional. So we have to understand it in their terms, right? They're speaking Spanish, they're telling us these things. It doesn't have a political connotation when they're saying it. So they're talking about conservatism as to conserve something, as to preserve something. So let's think about it as tradition. So tradition or conservatism as a barrier for urban growth. And the way they explained it is, it's a very traditional town. It's a town that embraces that small town feel, and that is making it so that there's no, not a lot of growth. Again, this is 2 people that said that, or that used that word. So the quote goes, ideas in the community are more conservative. Again, very traditional. I feel, in my opinion, there are certain people that live here or feel that certain people like to be more conservative and would like to have a smaller city, not to grow. Hispanics want something more open, perhaps to be more welcome, to get help, to be included in the city. Now, with this, it was interesting to see how this, when they were asked about what excites them about Ellensburg or what they find really good about Ellensburg, we see the other side of this, right? They're really excited about this. Could you change the slide? So what are people excited about? And this includes the Latinx perspective as well. So what I just mentioned, those concerns were unique to the Latinx perspective, but here we go back to seeing everybody, like everybody that were interviewed. So there's 3 big things: opportunities for growth, youth and future generations, and diversity and bridging gaps. So the first one, opportunities for growth, they're really excited about the future because some community members believe that growth will provide new and exciting opportunities for Ellensburg. Some of them talked about recreational facilities. Some of them talked about, and this was, I think, mostly in Yakima, but they were really excited of what's coming. So for example, well, we may be currently sleepy, but there are signs of growth. The university, is continuing to expand. Just the footprint of Ellensburg is growing. We had to add a new elementary school because our population continues to expand. So that's exciting. This was, again, shared also by the Latinx community. Investment in young people is also exciting to some. They believe that future generations of Ellensburg residents have a lot to offer. So they're seeing how this newer generation are bringing in some new ideas. I'm excited because of the youth. I think the youth have a good handle on things, generally speaking. We've got a good school district. I think our kids get a good education, which is important to well-being. Another area of excitement is how the new cultural opportunities and increasing diversity are also exciting. And so, and as Alex said, many of these comments were in reference also to Central, to the role of Central within the community. I see more cultural things happening here in town that speak of the needs of some of the minority population that we have for recognition and inclusion. And things are happening in the community. There's things happening for some of the art venues here in town, some of the business owners that are more tuned into the cultural difference and cultural needs. That also includes other services like Fish, for example. Some participants were really excited that there were new services being provided for people in need.
So, we were looking at this broader region, the Yakima, kind of the upper half of the Yakima River Basin, and we were interested not only in looking at well-being within these communities, but also across them, and whether there are connections across the region from in the central Washington, but also beyond. And so we asked folks about those regional connections, and it was clear that Ellensburg has sort of a crossroads feel to it, that the central location provides economic opportunities and cultural opportunities. Someone mentioned the various highways going through the area, and from retail opportunities to restaurants and the things to do, community events. There's a lot going on. There also were discussions about people leaving Ellensburg to go to other places, traveling to Yakima, for example, for maybe some shopping, particularly some folks looking for lower priced food options or ethnic goods. And so someone mentioned traveling down to Yakima for some more affordable and accessible foods. And so there's a variety of connections, and this extends on out into the west side, and some newcomers coming in from the Seattle area, and then in broader regional connections for agriculture and so forth. But Ellensburg plays this kind of central kind of hub and spoke kind of role for the most part for the region, but people also leave as well for various reasons. Okay, next slide. So what do we do with all of this information? And you guys have a planning process underway, and I'm sure that's a very rich process, taking in lots of different data points. So we're just trying to throw one more in for you. But I bring you this idea of guided transformations, and essentially this concept is not particularly novel. It's just the idea of a planned process of transitioning to a more preferred state, considering the integration of lots of factors: social, environmental, technological, economic dimensions, and so forth. And if you think about being, if you think about your historical condition, and you're in a particular condition, and you could either undergo some change, some disturbance, and shift into a less sort of sustainable, less resilient kind of position, or a window of opportunity, such as a planning process or anything else, could actually be an opportunity to come out of that maybe less desirable state and into a transformation into a more resilient condition, taking advantage of some of the innovations, of the new ideas, and the things that are exciting in a community. So we thought we'd just bring that idea to you. This is how we're situating our broader study. Take it for what you will. Next slide. So we would really like to turn this back to you and learn a little bit from you, if you're willing to share. Do these findings sound like your Ellensburg? Are there any surprises in what we've shared, or what's in the more extensive report that we have shared? And do you think that there are any areas in Ellensburg's experience that might be ripe for this guided transformation that you, as leaders in the community, could help move towards, and obviously already are in your planning process? So we want to share those questions with you. And then the last slide is just to say thank you so much. We have really enjoyed working with Ellensburg and learning more about your community, and we welcome your questions and your comments, and a continuing dialogue if there's anything we can do to be of help for you.
Right.
Thank you. Do you guys, anything from the Planning Commission?
Not at this time.
Just digest it a little bit.
Yeah.
Council.
Yeah, I've got a couple of questions. First, Dr. Flint, thank you for the presentation. A lot of interesting information here. I do have some questions, so forgive me. I got several just to understand a little bit of the background. First, as far as the pooled survey respondents, it's pretty small, 39 interviews. I was kind of curious, how long of a period that you conducted these interviews? Was this over a week, 2 weeks, a month, 3 months?
Yeah, thanks for the question. And just to be clear, this was not intended at all to be a survey. I conduct well-being surveys in Utah, and we just did surveys in 49 cities, and we had over 15,000 responses. So when I do a survey, we get lots and lots of people. This was purposefully a different approach. Really designed to do a qualitative approach. This works well when you don't quite know the answers to the questions you have, and it's an emergent process. And like I say, we were trying to get these different vantage points. We started our very first conversations last March, I guess. Really got in earnest with our interviews in May, June, July, and really ran through most of the summer and into early fall, conducting these interviews. So it really lasted a fair bit of time. And then we worked on analysis and worked with other communities. So it's meant to be more of a qualitative approach. It is not meant to be, statistically representative of all of the people in Ellensburg. If a survey was something you were interested in, that's something that absolutely could be done. to get the kind of numbers that you would think of as being more representative.
Thank you for that response, Dr. Flint. That actually addresses probably about 80% of my questions concerned, because I was having a struggle understanding the end game of the survey of this information, because forgive me, I'm more construction minded. So I am looking for more of the quantitative details as opposed to qualitative. So I was looking for the amount of people pulled, what is the end game? And quite frankly, when you talk about well-being, it's very subjective. So I was hoping there would be like a grading criteria associated with it. And that at the end of this, there would be a grade associated with your evaluation on Ellensburg versus whatever baseline city that you evaluated for it. So I'm a little bit lost as far as the overall intent without anything of a comparative or anything of a baseline, looking at the pool size again. But your explanation as far as being qualitative evaluation versus quantitative answered quite a bit of the supplemental questions that I have associated with this. The last thing, well, I'm going to pass it along to someone else. There was two other things that I had, but I'm going to pass it along to anyone else that has
Alex,
questions.
can you please take down the slide so we can see people better?
Yeah, hi, this is Joshua Thompson here. How was it advertised and where was it advertised?
So Alex, do you want to speak to this? I don't need to talk all the time. There were two processes.
Yeah, so we had kind of a separate process for the like quote unquote key informant interviews from the community member interviews. So I'll speak to both. So for the key informants, we had kind of those specific areas or spheres that Courtney mentioned that we were looking to talk to folks in. So most of those interviews were people who we specifically reached out to, either because of their role in like local government or their role with a key local business or a key like, nonprofit organization. So those folks were.
There was a selection process then. You went out and found specific people that met the criteria that you were putting together, correct?
For those key informant interviews, yes. And then for the community member interviews, we relied on many of our key informants to kind of distribute flyers in the community, advertising what we were hoping to do, and then anybody could volunteer to participate. So we had like physical flyer postings in places like the library. And then there was also kind of an electronic version of the flyer that got posted on some local Facebook pages and sent out on the city listserv, if I remember correctly.
So would it be fair to say then if you're picking the leaders and then they go out and find people, to me, that's an echo chamber. And one reason I'm so concerned is when looking into the Intermountain Transformation Network, I started reading the literature and it's very hard left. And when I read some of these responses that are blaming white people and white spaces and having to tiptoe around conservatism, as a white conservative, I'm super concerned. And I want to know like how much value can I take out of this if it is a left-leaning echo chamber report?
Yeah, thanks for sharing those concerns. I think we should make it very clear that we did not come in with any agenda. And our key informants, I can tell you, crossed a giant span of people, and from a political perspectives, business perspectives, local leaders from various stripes, and people who lead various community organizations and are involved in various community events. We also use what we call chain referral, and those people did refer us to others, but we looked to triangulation. When we saw someone being highlighted as someone who had kind of their finger on the pulse of a particular vantage point in the community that was mentioned by two very different people, those were people that we really highlighted as people we should talk to. We certainly reached out to a lot more people than actually followed up and were willing to speak with us, that's for sure. And as for the sharing of the flyers, these were generally placed in places like a library, the grocery stores, public, some of these community service organizations. And I think we worked very hard to make sure that they went out through various social medias and so that they were very widely accessible. And we really did hear from a broad cross section of people in the community. And I will just refer back to what Dr. Wright mentioned and trying to clarify that the way the term conservative was used in those interviews, it's a Spanish translation. It does not refer to the political leaning of that word conservatism. So I just want to clarify that's why we wanted to clarify that very specifically in our report.
Sure, I'm okay with that in terms of the word conservatism. It's a language issue. Are you willing to release? Let me back up. Were all the respondents guaranteed to be anonymous in doing this?
Participants were asked if they were willing or interested in being identified. And so they could make that choice, and some did and some didn't choose to be identified. We've chosen to err on the conservative side of protecting people's identities. They can certainly identify themselves, and we can identify some, but not all. Our process is governed by our University Institutional Review Board that we have to guarantee anonymity or confidentiality if that's what people request. And so there's a little bit of a split on who we can identify and who we can't. And if we reveal the identities of only some of the people because of their willingness, you can imagine it would give a pretty incomplete picture of the whole nature, which is why we've shared with you those general spheres that people come from.
So then, just for clarity, you're not willing to share the individuals that self-selected that they're willing to be shared. I guess where I'm trying to get to is I want to understand the underpinnings of the survey, and all of that is based upon the respondents. And so if we don't know what that mix is, it's really hard for me to say, is this representative of the county, and especially a lot of these responses really do lean left in a county that is deep red when you go outside of Ellensburg. I would like to know if there was a 50-50 split or an attempt to do that, or if it was just, like you said, a chain referral through individuals you selected as people you wanted to work with, which that's a thumb on the scale.
Yeah, well, thank you. And it wasn't meant to be a survey, so it was not meant to be a representative sampling. It was focused on Ellensburg alone and not on the county as a whole. We had some countywide perspectives of the people who we were looking for information on Ellensburg or on Cle Elum or Roslyn, and people happened to have a countywide perspective. And so we took advantage of that information. But our focus was on Ellensburg, particularly as a community. And we did work very hard to cut across those spheres and to make sure that we were, if we started to feel like we were getting out of balance in terms of perspective, we reached out to try to right that balance. And that's natural in a qualitative study like this. A quantitative survey could be developed out of some of the information that was gleaned in this study. And in fact, that's a very common thing, to have a qualitative interview approach first, understand the array of issues facing a community, and then develop a survey. And that's something that you or someone in the community had often done as part of planning processes as well. And so, yeah.
Okay. I'll let somebody else talk. Sorry.
I remember my two follow-up really quick, if that's okay. Dr. Flint, really quick, was there a metrics behind what qualified a city as being in need of a transformation? And I think simply because in my mind, not to make it quantitative, but just understanding kind of the baseline comparison on what you are recommending to aspire to would be good as a kind of baseline.
Yeah, so in terms of community selection, the Transformation Network as an NSF funded project has 4 focal regions in the Intermountain West. Yakima River Basin is one, the Poudre River area in the Front Range of Colorado, northern New Mexico and the Rio Grande, and then the Four Corners area. And that's related to the institutions that are involved in the project. within that region, we reached out to many communities in the Yakima River Basin to see if they were interested. We didn't want to come in and do work in a community where unless we had sort of the blessing from the community leaders, the government leaders in the city. And so we had that in Ellensburg and all the other cities that we did end up working with. And you know, there is not a comparison per se. We're not trying to hold Ellensburg to some set standard. We're trying to undergo a process to, you know, from an academic standpoint, understand how, you know, thinking about well-being, which we define as everything that makes up a good life. And really it's in the eyes of the beholder. As you said, it's very subjective. So we didn't want to put a set of standards. We wanted to learn more organically how people in Ellensburg and the other communities, how they feel that, you know, what contributes to their well-being as we're trying to understand this across communities. And so it's an opportunity to gather some information. It's not meant to be you know, a score or some sort of judgment at all about the community. It's just meant to raise some issues, offer them to you along our way of learning about community well-being.
Okay, thank you. And then the last thing I had here was how many other cities have done this qualitative evaluation or assessment? Assessment.
So we worked with Ellensburg and Cle Elum and Roslyn and Tieton and Yakima. We in the region, and that's what our project is to date. Like I mentioned, I've been studying well-being across communities in Utah, and I've just recently been working with 49 communities in Utah, from very rural to very urban. And we have a survey that we administer in those cities for residents to participate in. And that's a very different approach. But we've been studying well-being in communities throughout the West. I've been studying them in Alaska and Colorado and Montana as well. So we have some vantage points, but again, it's not meant to be a comparison.
Thank you.
Nancy.
Going back to your question, does this sound like our community? I think it does. The concerns that were shared by the people that you talk to are the concerns that we hear every day. People care about their kids. They care about healthcare. They care about food. They care about, and they're concerned about affordable housing. They don't want to lose their small town field. I mean, those are givens. I mean, that's very, in my opinion, we all are aware of those pieces. So I think, you know, it's like you say, it's not an evaluation. It's more an observation from the 39 people that they talked to. These are the themes that surfaced from their interviews, and they sound like Ellensburg to me. I don't know, I may be the only one on the council that thinks so, but in terms of opportunities for transformation, I think there are some possibilities that we could talk about and look at. The whole notion that it'd be nice to be able to have some intention about the growth that we are going through and helping people who struggle with change to realize growth is happening. But if we do it well and we do it correctly, it's going to end up with a much better product than it would have if we don't do anything. So I think there's some room for conversation there about if we wanted to do that, about providing a transformational kind of experience. But I want to thank you for your hard work.
Now you're going to get it from another Nancy.
Okay. Alex reached out to me when I was mayor, and I was interested in pursuing this, and I just wanted to give everyone maybe a little more background of what I was thinking. When the project was explained to me, it sounded a little bit like it could be complementary to what we've been doing with the Belonging in the Berg events, but it was also seemed similar to the last time we did our big comprehensive plan update. We had a community heart and soul approach to getting public input on our comp plan, and it started with what are our values, and very qualitative, because those kinds of conversations just kind of are qualitative. And so looking forward to our next update, it just seemed like this might be good information that we can weave into all of the other information that we gather about the community and what people value about our community as we move forward. And I think I agree with Nancy mostly that it sounds like our community. I mean, definitely, those are the themes I hear about what's important to people and their concerns. I think that so I think you did a good job, and I guess as we move forward into our planning process, we can verify whether this is representative to Josh's concerns, but for what you did and what your goals were, I think it is reflective.
Anybody else?
Just, Dr. Flint, again, thank you for this information. Just as this is my personal thought recommendation on this. As a city council, we deal with qualitative information all day long. Everybody that's in this room has qualitative data they're going to be feeding us, how they feel, how they perceive their community. And these from people that live here in our community. And then the council has to take that qualitative, work with the city personnel to get quantitative so that we can hopefully make informed decisions to improve the qualitative. So whenever you're looking at maybe the next iteration of this, I think part of that is understanding the delivery method to another body like us that has to take qualitative all day, every day, and then be able to turn that into quantitative options that we can actually execute as a city to improve the qualitative things that we're hearing. And we have the responsibility of trying to hear every perspective and try to balance that out for all the things that we're hearing from a qualitative standpoint. The information you presented is valid. I think there's a lot of good content in it. I just, whenever as a city council, again, just my personal view on this, I'm going to be looking for stuff that's executionable in our role. And again, after you get off of this, we're going to have lots of feedbacks on a lot of different subjects that we're going to have to take, turn into quantitative, and then push it back out. So thank you again for that. Was my last comment.
Sure, and I really appreciate that. And this study was designed in this way, but like I say, a survey could easily be designed, and I'll have Alex send to folks he has communication with. I'll just, for what it's worth, send you a copy of the Utah Wellbeing Survey that is a quantifiable survey that can be used to obtain quantitative measures from people about their well-being. And for what it's worth, you're welcome to use it if it makes sense in your context. If you'd like help with it, I'd be glad to help. But we're grateful for your time. Obviously, a process like this is not going to necessarily hear from everyone. We value your feedback a great deal, and we wish you all the best as you move forward with your planning process and your community. Thank you.
Hang on just a sec. Is there anything you guys want to add?
I just want to echo what Delano said. I think if this information might be considered as an initial exploration, like a pilot survey, that will inform deeper question, what we can take and use it towards the comprehensive plan, like some actionable items. I think there's information here that we can develop.
Kathy, get your mic close. No, bring it closer.
Bring it closer to you.
So there are good information here that we can utilize to frame questions that we can, like based on like different sections within the comprehensive plan, that we can inform it better and as we work on our next 10-year, 20-year plan. And the representation is critical, like that was brought up, so we need to make sure randomize and all those good stuff that will address, that will create more buy-in and acceptance of the data that will come out. So that should be considered too, so.
Could I just add one comment? Just, I would echo the other comments that I look at this type of work as a sort of high level view of a situation. It's not a problem solving exercise. It wasn't designed to be. It's intended to start the conversation and facilitate evaluation. So having done that, I'm perfectly satisfied with it as a draft. So thank you.
One last comment. I just want to remind everyone that we hear from the people who show up. We do not ever get a statistically valid opinion poll of what people think.
Thank you very much.
Thank you all.
So do you guys have anything you want to regarding this subject? Okay. Then we're going to adjourn. 1900, we'll resume the regular city council meeting.
Thank you very much.